Hey, this is Dan, and this is I forgot to turn on my camera this morning in Sunday school, so this is February 26th, and this is the Sunday school lesson in the chapel. And of course, we started the book of Exodus last Sunday, and so we're only at chapter 2. And last week, this is where we left off, where Moses had killed the Egyptian who was um, beaten up on a on a Hebrew, and it was discovered. And so yeah, because verse 14 from last week, when he saw another Egyptian, no, he saw two Hebrews fighting with each other, and he tried to get them to, you know, why smitest thou thy brother? And they said, who made you a prince or judge over us? You intend to kill me like you did the Egyptian? So he was found. And so throughout this, I'm going to use the word Shemot. That's the Hebrew word for the book of Exodus, Shemot, which means these are the names that when it began with the names of those that were in Egypt that were called out. Uh, and Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. Now, when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. This is what we have in our normal 66 book Bibles in the book of Exodus. But what we need to look at is this little pause. There's a lot of information between Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and sat down by a well in Midian. And we find this information in the non-canonical book of Jasher. And this is from Jasher chapter 71. Keep in mind, Jasher was considered scripture. We're not sure who wrote it. Some think it's Moses wrote this. It's very similar in a lot of ways to what you're reading about in the history of the children of Israel, but it adds different details of things that were left out of the normal version of Exodus. And so this says, and Pharaoh heard of this affair, and he ordered Moses to be killed, slain. So Elohim, God, sent an angel, and he appeared unto Pharaoh in the likeness of a captain of a guard. And the angel of Yahweh took the sword from the hand of the captain of the guard and took his head off with it, for the likeness of the captain of the guard was turned into the likeness of Moses. So this sounds a little bizarre through here, but what this is telling us is that God, Yahweh, staged a fake execution of Moses before Pharaoh. And the angel of Yahweh took hold of the right hand of Moses and brought him forth from Egypt and placed him from without the borders of Egypt, a distance of 40 days' journey. How far can you travel on foot in 40 days, in a month and a couple of weeks? And Aaron and his brother alone remained in the land of Egypt. And he prophesied to the children of Israel, saying, Aaron is now prophesying. Moses is gone. He maybe they're not sure where he went. Thus says the God, Yahweh, Elohim of your ancestors, throw away each man the abominations of his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. So we see that now Aaron is beginning to really preach to the children of Israel about turning back to God and the one God. Perhaps they had slipped into idol worship, being there in Egypt for 200 years. Jasher 72:1 continues. Now it says, this seems a little disjointed right now, but you'll see the connection in a minute. And it was in those days that there was a great war between the children of Cush and the children of the east of Aram, and they rebelled against the king of Cush, in whose hands they were. So, big deal. What does it have to do with anything? Well, skip down to verse 21. At that time that the war and the siege were against Cush, Moses fled from Egypt, from Pharaoh, who sought to kill him for having slain the Egyptian. And Moses was 18 years old when he fled from Egypt. Now, this fake staged execution of Moses just bought some time, because obviously the Pharaoh, even according to Yasher, is sending people to find Moses for killing the Egyptian. And Moses was 18 years old. And Moses was 9 years in the camp of Kikianus, king of Cush. That's where they're having a little rebellion going on. And the king and princes of all the fighting men, they loved Moses, for he was great and worthy, and he was counselor to the king. At the end of 9 years, Hyrcanus died. So now Moses would be 27, 26, 27. 27. And they wished to choose on that day a man for king from the army of Hyrcanus. And they found no object of their choice like Moses to reign over them. They really liked Moses, and they hastened and stripped off each man his garment and cast him on the ground. They made a great heap and placed Moses on. I don't know what all that's about. Some tradition they had. And all the people and the nobles swore unto him to give him for a wife Adoniah, who was the queen, the Cushite wife of Hyrcanus, and they made Moses king over them on that day. And Moses reigned over the children of Cush on that day in the place of Hyrcanus, king of Cush. Now, where is this? It says Moses was 27 years old when he began to reign over Cush. And 40 years did he reign. He reigned for 40 years, starting from age 27. He went for 40 years, being the king over this vast land here, which is today modern Sudan, that's Ethiopia, and Somalia. And just to give you a perspective of this, how small, because you've seen this area up here where the children of Israel fled, after the 10th plague, and they crossed over the Gulf of Aqaba up here and went to the land of Midian way up here. Well, this is a huge land, and it says that Moses went there. Now, I did it on Google Earth in a straight line from Egypt, where Moses was up here in the land of Goshen, and there's where the Egyptians lived, in a straight line to somewhere south of the border into Cush. It's 1,070 kilometers, and here you see the modern border of Sudan and Egypt. But if Moses probably followed the Nile River, which, he's on foot, he probably would have done that. That bumps it up to, 1,400, 1,500 miles. Don't know how far into Sudan, into Kush he went. But that's why it took him 40 days journey. But he put some distance between him and Pharaoh, who was wanting to kill him. But look here. Here's the Red Sea. This is the Gulf of Suez. This is the Gulf of Aqaba. This is where the children of Israel, when they left, they crossed over into this wilderness, came up to Nuebe Beach. You can barely see a speck of it right there, be jutting out. They crossed over right there. Mount Sinai, Jabal al-Lawz in Saudi Arabia is about right there. And that's where our journey is going to take us. Now back to Yashar chapter 76. And it says, all the children of Cush loved Moses. And all the days that he reigned over them, in the 40th year, the reign of Moses over Cush, Moses was sitting on the royal throne while the queen Adoniah was before him. And remember, she was made his queen. Well, Adoniah, the queen, said before the king and the princes, he said, guys, you know surely that for 40 years that this man has reigned over Cush, and he has not approached me, nor has he served the gods of the children of Cush. So Moses really didn't have anything to do with the queen, particularly not sexually. And he didn't serve the gods of the children of Cush. She said, hear, O children of Cush, and let this man no more reign over you. He's not of our flesh. He's not one of us, really. And she said, behold, her own son, Menacrus, my son, is grown up. Let him reign over you. And all the people and nobles of the children of Cush heard these words which Adonai the queen had spoken in their ears. And in the morning they rose up early and they agreed. They made Menacrus, son of Hyrcanus, king over them. And all the children of Israel, they were afraid, though, to stretch forth their hand against Moses, for they knew the Lord was with Moses. But the children of Cush, they gave many presents to Moses and sent him from them with great honor. You can just see it. Moses, we really love you, but, the queen's got a point. It's like finding out the president wasn't born in the United States. So they said, Moses, you got to go. We love you. We give you a bunch of presents and money, and God bless you. And so Moses went forth from the land of Cush, and Moses was 66 years old when he went out. So Moses went to Midian, for he was afraid to return to Egypt on account of Pharaoh. See, he still wondered if they were out to kill him for killing the Egyptian. And he went and sat at a well of water in Midian. Now, back where we left off. What we just did is those little dots through there. And now he's sitting by a well. So we're back to the book of Exodus or Shemot. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they can just say priest of Midian. They, it's not like they had a temple or something. It's priest of Midian probably refers more like he's the overseer, the king, the highest one, but had maybe some religious authority over them because they called him a priest. But they had 7 daughters, and they came, drew water, filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them. Good man. And he watered their flock. And when they came to Ruel, now who is this? See, the priest of Midian is Ruel. He had the 7 daughters. Jethro was also called Ruel. See, this man he's the priest of Midian, but his name is Ruel, and he's also called Jethro. Ruel meant friend of God, while Jethro meant excellence. Ruel was apparently his personal real name, while Jethro may have been a more official or honorary name. The Midianites originated from Midian, a son of Abraham. See that back in Genesis, which therefore actually made Yitro, Ruel, same guy, made him and Moses distant cousins. And so when they came to their father and said, he said, well, how'd you get back so soon? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds. Well, how did they know he was an Egyptian? He must have said he was from Egypt, or maybe his accent or language may have been Egyptian. And so they figured he was Egyptian. But Moses would not have had an Egyptian complexion. He wouldn't have looked like an Egyptian. His mother and father were Hebrew. So he probably said that he was from Egypt, which was true. And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and also drew water enough for us and water the flock. And Ruel says, well, where is he? Well, why'd you leave him out there? Where is he? Call him that he may eat bread and we can thank him. Now, back to Jasher, chapter 76. We were at 72, now we're up to 76. This is relating what Ruel did concerning Moses. And they came home to their father Ruel and told him what Moses did for them. And Moses related to Ruel that he had fled from Egypt and that he reigned 40 years over Cush. It's like, yeah, you were an immigrant you're fleeing Egypt, and now you're the king over Cush for 40 years? Yeah, right. So he said, I'm going to put this man in prison, and then I'm going to ask the children of Cush, what's going on, for he's fled from them. Maybe there's a bounty for him. He didn't know. And they took and put him in the prison house, and Moses was in prison 10 years. So they put him in prison, kind of forgot about him, really. But while he was in prison, Ruel's daughter Zipporah took pity on him and supported him with bread and water all the time. She was there when he saved them from the guys that were giving a hard time with the shepherds. Jasher 77, at the end of 10 years, Zipporah says to her father, remember that Hebrew man? He's been in prison now for 10 years. Now, therefore, if it seemed good in your sight, let's send and see whether he's alive or dead. She knew he was alive, but her father knew not that she'd supported him. And Ruel said to her, can it be that such a man could be shut up in prison? He says, without food for 10 years. Well, without prison food, it would be so malnourished, he probably would have died. How can somebody live in a prison for 10 years? And Zipporah answered her father, saying, well, surely thou hast heard that the God of Hebrews is great. Like she's saying, well, maybe God is, their God has a reputation. That's interesting, because if he had a reputation, it would have been in connection with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph interpreting the dreams. That was 200 years earlier. What had the God of Hebrews done for the Hebrews while they were in Egypt? And then they became slaves. But Zipporah knew that they still had, their God had a reputation. And of course, she knew she'd been feeding him this whole time. And the thing seemed good inside of Ruel, so he did according to the word of his daughter. And they went to the dungeon and see what happened to Moses. And behold, Moses was living in the dungeon, standing on his feet, praising and praying to the God of his ancestors. Kind of reminds you of, Peter and Paul in the prison, singing, giving praises while in prison. And Ruel commanded Moses to be brought out of the dungeon. So they shaved him and changed his prison garments, and he ate bread. Okay. And afterward, now we're continuing on verse 38. Afterward, Moses went, because he's settled now among the Midianites. He's out of prison. And he went into the garden of Ruel. And it was while he was there, he prayed and he looked up and he saw a sapphire stick was placed in the ground. Well, that's unusual. And he approached the stick and saw that the name Yod He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton, was written on that stick. That's very unusual. What's that doing there? And he read it and stretched forth his hand. He plucked it up like a forest tree from the thicket. And this is the stick. What was this stick? This is the rod, became the rod of Moses. Here's the history of it. It's the stick with which all the works of God were performed after he created heaven and earth. And when God had driven Adam from the Garden of Eden, Adam took the stick. He gave it to Adam. And the stick came down to Noah and was given to Shem until it came to the hand of Abraham, the Hebrew, who gave it to Isaac, who gave it to Jacob. Then when Jacob goes to Padan Aram, he took it. And also he went down to Egypt. He gave it to Joseph. And after the death of Joseph, it passed through a few more hands. Somehow or another, it came into the hand of Ruel the Midianite. And Ruel actually had served Pharaoh in Egypt, we know. And when Ruel went out of Egypt, he took it and put it in his garden. And all the mighty men of the Kenites tried to pick it up, pluck it, when they endeavored to get Zipporah his daughter. See, it's almost like the sword and the stone kind of a deal. Only a certain one worthy could pick it up, and whoever could pick up, pluck up that rod would win the hand of Zipporah. But everybody was unsuccessful doing that. So here comes Moses, and he picks it up like nobody's business and just took it. And when Ruel saw the stick in the hand of Moses, his jaw dropped. He wondered at it. And he said, "Oh my goodness, this man who I put in prison for 10 years, something special about this man." And he gave him his daughter Zipporah for a wife. We're now back to the book of Exodus, Shemot, Exodus. And so all we know from Exodus, the book, is that Moses came and took up in the land of Midian and became a shepherd. And Moses was content to dwell with Ruel, and he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter. And she bare him a son and called his name Gershom. For he said, "I have been a stranger in a strange land." And it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage. And they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham. These children of Israel may not have really gone into harsh slavery until about the time Moses was born and found by Pharaoh's daughter, because when Moses, what caused Moses to flee was that he saw an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew. Maybe they were already beginning to be enslaved at that point, so they might have been slaves, what, 40, 50, 60 years maybe. But God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. Remember, he's been learning to be a shepherd, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. You've seen this word Horeb. It seems to be either one and the same to Sinai, or it's a mountain right next to Sinai, or Horeb is the name of the region of mountains in which Sinai is. But whenever you see Horeb, Sinai, we can think of them, it's about the same thing. And the angel of the Lord, Yahweh, appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. You know this story. And I put a picture of Jesus in this burning bush because it says the angel of the Lord. Anytime you see the angel of Yahweh that has such authority to speak, this isn't just an ordinary messenger. It says that the angel of the Lord appeared to him. I believe this was a Christophany, and a pre-incarnate Christ, if you will. And here this bush is burning with fire, but the bush is not consumed. And Moses said, "I need to look at this and see the sight, why this bush is not burnt." And when Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe, or Moses. And he said, Hineni. He said, Here am I. That's that phrase that's used by so many that when they heard God calling, they responded with, Here am I. That's the word that you and I need to say when God calls us. Hineni, I'm available. And so here is God calling out to Moses from the burning bush. Someone wrote this. I thought this was very good, as if maybe kind of wondering if this is not what God said to Moses. Moshe, Moshe, this bush that is burning but not consumed. It's a picture of you. How can that be? What does that mean? How many bushes have you seen out here, Moshe? How many have burned up with nothing left, like normal fires burn up bushes, right? The fire has been hot in your life. You've been burning, but you're still here. And if you will let me, I'll be the fire in your bush. Just like it caught your eye, many will be caught by the fire that is burning in you, but doesn't consume you. I'll be the voice in that fire. I'll be the power you need to fulfill my call on your life. I am the fire. Isn't that interesting to look at that perspective? And this is very true. If God has put his fire within you, people will catch that. They will see something different about you. And your life can be on fire for the Lord, but yet you're not going to be consumed. You're like the burning bush, being burnt up, being consumed, but not consumed. That's a great quote, great thought. Ponder that. And Moses said, and God said, Draw not thy hither, take off your shoes, this is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, your earthly father, Amram, but I'm the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. And Moshe hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon Ha Elohim, the God. And Yahweh said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land, large land flowing with milk and honey, and where all these people are living right now that you're going to be casting out. He says, Come now, therefore, and I'm going to send you to Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. He's calling Moses to go back to Egypt, to this Pharaoh, and say, Let my people go. And he only said that Moses would bring them out. He never said Moses would take them into the promised land. He just said, Bring forth my people out. The question is, are you living in an Egypt? Egypt represents the world, sinfulness. Does Yahweh know your sorrows? Are you crying out to him? Does Yahweh desire to deliver you from the bondage of addictions or sin? Um, he wants to free you from all that. Will you obey him when obey him when and where he leads you? But he's going to lead you not just out of bondage, he wants to lead you to somewhere, just like he leads the children of Israel to Mount Sinai to learn more of him. And Moses said unto Elohim, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I'm going to be with you, and this is going to be a token that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. He's telling Moses, you're not only going to go get them, you're going to bring them out, and you're going to bring them right back here where this burning bush was. Yahweh has two desires for his people in this passage. Number one, to come out of bondage. Number two, to serve him on his mountain. Now I think this is his desires for us still. Come out of your bondage, serve him on his mountain, on his terms, in his way, obeying his commands. There are many who desire freedom from the bondage of sin and the accompanying promise of eternal life. Yeah. But not so many want to serve him on his mountain. What's that mean? His mountain? That's the mountain where the Torah was given, where all of his commandments were given. Not so many want to be as obedient as he demands that we be. And most of those willing to serve him do not want to do so under the parameters of his mountain where he gave us his Torah. So that's kind of the question. There are a lot of that can find freedom from bondage of sin, but there are not as many who really want to spend the rest of their lives serving him on his terms. And so Moses says, behold, when I come to these people and say, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and what if they say, what's his name? What shall I say to them? He's asking God. And Ha Elohim means the God, said unto Moshe, and you've seen this before, I am that I am. This is it in Hebrew. Ayeh, Asher, Ayeh. It means I am that I am, but it has a future tense to it as well. It means I shall be what I shall be. It also has a past tense. I was what I was. I am what I am. I shall be what I shall be. That is all encompassing our God. And each of these words begin with an aleph. And of course, we know the aleph tav, the first letter of the alphabet. That letter just symbolizes, stands for God. And so we've seen this where God says, tell them I am has sent me unto you. So we've pondered that and we say, well, one of the names of God must be I am, because he said, tell them I am sent me. But we don't really use that. We use that as a description that he is what he is. He shall be what he shall be. But we don't, like for instance, in our prayers, we don't say, dear I am, please come and heal my brother. We don't address him that way. Well, let me show you something, the rest of this passage, because this passage is not through. To stop and say that I am is his name, he clarifies that a little more. I am hath sent me unto you. And Elohim said, moreover, see, this is a continuation. He said also, moreover, more than that, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, the Lord God, and in Hebrew it's Yehovah Elohei, the God of your fathers, Yahweh. He says, Yahweh, God of your fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, has sent me unto you. This is the one who sent me unto you, Yehovah, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh. And he says, this is my name forever. And this is my memorial unto all generations. Why have we missed this? Because we've not used Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh in all of our English Bibles. We have made it Lord God, or just Lord, capital Lord. In Hebrew, it's Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The problem is maybe because we don't really know how to pronounce Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. But you've seen this. We've talked about this before, the Tetragrammaton, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. What's so fascinating is that in the Paleo, the picture language, the Yod is a picture of a hand. The Hey is a picture of a man with his hands up. It means to behold. It's also in Paleo a picture of a window. So it can mean to behold something, to see something, to reveal something. The Vav is a picture of a nail. It always has been. And it still looks like it in modern Hebrew. And then another Hey. We see the hand, behold, the nail, behold. That sounds an awful lot like Jesus to me. There's Jesus crucified from the foundation of the world. Now, how do we pronounce this Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh? You can say Yahweh, because the Vav and the Wah, the W sound, we're not sure they've been both used or simultaneous or interchangeable. Yahweh or Yahweh. There's no J in Hebrew, so we see the word Jehovah. That's a close way to pronounce this in English, Jehovah. But if you just make the J a yay, a Y, the Y sound, it would be Yehovah. The accent's always on the last syllable. Yehovah, Jehovah, or Yehovah. Some I know the Assembly of Called Out Believers, he pointed this out, the pastor of that church, said, well, the Hebrew word for love is ahava, ahava. And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh could be pronounced Yahava. Very similar. Ahava and Yahava. So he likes to pronounce God's name as Yahava. Dr. Pigeon, another well-known Bible scholar, he says, well, these are all consonants. Yet to pronounce the four letters as only vowel sounds sets the very word apart from man. So he uses just the vowels that would come out of this. Iyawa, Iyawa. And so without any consonant, instead of Yehovah, he just pronounces it Iyawa. And that's an interesting concept to study on, because you look at the early American Indians and the connection. Did they have any connection to the divided kingdom, the lost tribes? Indian names sound like this: Iowa, Ohio. They're just vowel sounds, and they can kind of be similar to that. Don't know. That's just a thought. All right, I managed to get through this lesson in 30 minutes, whereas I took about 55 minutes in the class. We chased a few rabbits. But I want to end with this song that I wrote about 4 years ago for Mount Ebal Baptist Church for their revival. And I wanted to use this song because it's the song I was using to teach them the name Yahweh. And in this song, I don't say Yehovah, I don't say Yahweh, I say Yahweh. But it's a song called Yahweh, You Never Change. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time, maybe with the live camera in the class. All right, I'll play it for you.
You're always the same, Yahweh, Yahweh, forever you're always the same, Yahweh, Yahweh, Atal Olam, Lo Tishtana, Yahweh, Yahweh, Atal Olam, Lo Tishtana. Change, you're always the same, Yahweh, Yahweh, forever you're always the same. I wanna walk in that land, I'm talking Jerusalem, sing a song to the Lamb, the great I am. Will you come and receive? Will you fall on your knees? Pray a prayer for the blind men, eyes to see. Yeshua has come to set them free. Yahweh, Yahweh, Atal Olam, Lo Tishtana. Yahweh, Yahweh, Atal Olam, Lo Tishtana. Yahweh, Yahweh, you never change. You're always the same, Yahweh, Yahweh, forever you're always the same. Yeshua gave us his law so we can know how to walk and not be those who only talk the talk. The way we served you back then was to keep your commands. By your grace is the way we enter in. But you did not die so we could sin. Judah, Ephraim, divided